To be kept up to date, make sure that you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. If you enjoy the podcast video, make sure that you hit the like button on our YouTube channel. So let's begin. So this is another Hertfordshire web design episode that pretty much focuses on a 5-minute snippet. Today I need to talk to you about the issue of domain and the domain names themselves. Whether you may or may not know, it's actually quite important to know the roundup behind it. As domains go, the bbc.co.uk is the text that you write in the web browser or your mobile phone is a domain. So the words bbc.co.uk written as a text is pretty much a representative of what a domain is. Companies register them, and that's what I need to talk to you about. I'm not going to discuss the issue of content, which is hosting, which is actually looking after your content, looking after your information, looking after the ins and outs of the images that are held within that domain. That's technically hosting. So the difference between the two is that you have got a domain name registered. You have got that as a business, you would have that as a website address. When you fill that into a browser, the stuff that turns up is the content, and that's held on a server somewhere. If that didn't happen, what would happen is you'd be taken to the person who is hosting that domain for you, and you'll just basically come up with an error screen or even a holding page. And that happens with a lot of companies, that even independents or a friend that you may have got to build your website, or a colleague you may know, or someone who's an agency, puts that content together. That content is just content hosted somewhere, but the reference of the domain is literally, to use an analogy, is where you live, is the address. So you put a postage out to someone, the content that you write on the cover of that envelope or that postage is the address, and that who owns that address. Is it you? Is it the landlord? Is it somebody else? And the point that I'm making here is the content or the hosting is all the furniture in the inside, or the paraphernalia on the inside. So now that we've defined the difference between domain and hosting, what we found in the past that we can't work with clients because they physically don't own the domain that they're on. And this is one of the things that you should walk away from this podcast from, is immediately, if you do have a website, find out if you own the domain. There are companies out there, or even speak to the person who's registered the domain and find out that is if it's registered to you, if you are the owner. Is it registered to your company if you are an employee? And it's one of those things where it will have a detrimental effect on your email address, because your email address, if you're working for a company or for yourself, is actually registered as part of the domain itself. So if, say for example, Mark at the bbc.co.uk, if the bbc.co.uk was owned by a clandestine operation with malicious intent, what you'll find is that if the bbc.co.uk decided to go into some sort of lawsuit and they realise they don't own that domain anymore, all those emails will be completely bunk and won't be able to be used, because they will be part of that domain chain. So the domain itself as an actual address is important and paramount. So there's companies that check this for you. There's also online resources that are there, like Whois, and that's WHOIS searches that actually define who actually owns the domain, and you can do more digging. But it's one of those things that we find has actually caused us a lot of problems in the past, is that people do not own the domain that they're on. I mean, luckily some of them have been performing so poorly in the past that creating a new domain name was possibly better for them. But yeah, so to round this up, what I'd say is research. Find out who actually owns the domain that you're on. The domain is pretty much going to be yours for the foreseeable future, so it's paramount to you. Speak to you later, and be sure to hear from us soon.